Join us as we sit down with remarkable individuals from various walks of life who face their fair share of obstacles and emerged with positivity. Each episode, you'll hear inspiring stories, actionable tips, and wisdom that can supercharge your own journey when using adversity as motivation. Let's learn together. Welcome to Lauer Power.
Welcome to Lauer Power. Here we are with another episode. Thanks so much for joining us. Using adversity as motivation alongside Chad Lauer. My name is Chad Evans here in 8 days a week studio in Stone State Entertainment Productions, I guess, right here in Northumberland, Pennsylvania, in Northumberland County. Chad, what's happening, man?
Not much, man. Talk about being a leader. I have to, right off the bat, tell a story about you. How does that sound?
Oh,
so
we're off to such a good start.
So recently,
yeah,
I ran into you at a flag football championship game.
Yeah, that's right.
So part of being a leader is doing things when nobody's looking. And I didn't even know it, but I started chatting with you. I'm like, what are you doing here, man? And you said, well, I'm here to collect a check. And I was like, collect a check? Who are you collecting a check from at a flag football game? And you looked me in the eye and you said, well, you know, I'm on the board of Think Big, which is for pediatric cancer.
Yeah.
I didn't know you were on that board.
I am on that board of Think Big, led by a friend of mine, Dr. Colby Wessner. Think Big is a 501c3 nonprofit that helps families battle pediatric cancer. We're not out curing cancer. We are helping families battle pediatric cancer with the things of like, you know, we're going to knock out your month rent. We'll pay for the lights if we have to. We'll, give you enough money for a sandwich kind of thing. You know, a lot of families have to take time off when their child is in the hospital. So the world doesn't stop, right? So we're there to help and lend assistance in any way we can. And I've been there on the board since its inception. So
when was that, if you don't mind me asking, Chad?
Oh, that's a great question, Chad.
It's been a while? Or?
Yeah, it's been a while. It's been... oh my gosh, I might get this wrong, but it might be 10 years, close to 10 years, where we were able to give back to the families more than $1 million.
Whoa.
Yeah, so it's been really, really great for the community and for those families that battle pediatric cancer.
And dude, again, as a leader, you're just doing this stuff and I didn't even know about it, right? Mm-hmm. That's what leaders do. You know, it's not always about them, it's about other people. And Chad, not to kind of go off on this tangent, but you also were a part of Camp Dosed, right? Can you tell the audience about Camp Dosed, please, as well?
Camp Dosed is a camp for sick kids, I guess. And there's a lot of people out there that needs a lot more credit than what I did. I mean, I went out there and threw a party for the kids, you know, so I'd go and DJ with my little turntables, you know, and we'd play songs, and it was the greatest night ever to do. But it's a week-long camp for kids that need some help, and there's a lot of camp counselors out there, a lot of leaders in that show kids a great time, and it's so much fun. It's so much fun. But it's been a while since I've been out there.
Yeah, well, I learned of that through my sister-in-law, Tamara Roth-Sitko, but she used to rave about the impact that you had on the kids at Camp Dose. So the reason why I wanted to start this podcast with that is, you know, we all are leaders in our communities. You've obviously continued to do these things and had an impact on people. And today, our guest is Danielle Houtz, which goes along with the theme of the 501c nonprofit. So she started Oasis Recovery Club in Shamokin, Pennsylvania, to help those impacted by addiction. And she's just a rock star. You'll learn more about her story as our podcast proceeds here today. But really, the mission of Oasis Recovery is to expand beyond individuals in recovery, offer support to those affected by drug and alcohol abuse. And their ultimate goal is to schedule a comprehensive schedule of support groups and be an advocate of starting an individual on the path to recovery. My life has been significantly impacted by addiction through my father, who I lost at the age of 17. And, you know, it really kind of impacted our life beyond, what anyone could imagine. So I really have a personal, story to go along with this, and I can't wait to share Danielle's story. And the most inspiring thing about her is she's doing this while battling, issues, major health issues on her own. And she's just an inspiration to everyone. And, I think you're going to agree once you hear her speak to being the president of Oasis for Recovery in Shamokin, Pennsylvania. Danielle Houtz, thank you again for joining us on this podcast. I think it's ironic that, as I mentioned on our previous podcast, that I recently joined the Shamokin Rotary and met you, Danielle, who presented on Oasis. And I think it was divine that we were able to meet each other. And that day, just for the audience to listen, I asked you to come join me on this podcast journey, because I immediately felt a connection to you after hearing your story and you kind of telling the Rotary about Oasis. So what I'd like to do today is share your story with our listeners. So I want to welcome Danielle Houtz. And Danielle, what we're going to do today is I have a few questions just to get started to learn about your story. And I'm going to ask those, and then, we're going to have a casual conversation and, have a lot of fun. How does that sound?
That sounds great. And thank you guys for having me today.
Yeah. So Danielle, can you tell us how Oasis started and the journey from your initial idea to making it what it is today?
Sure. Actually, I have to kind of go back a little bit further, though, to tell you how it started. I need to tell you a little bit about myself. So like you said, my name is Danielle Houtz, and I'm the founder of the Oasis Community Recovery Club. It's known in Shamokin as Oasis, which was kind of the idea, and I'll get to that later on how the name came about. But I grew up in Shamokin. I have a brother who's 2 years younger than me. We have parents who divorced when we were kids. And so it was just him and I, not that we were like abandoned by our parents, but we grew up close, as a split home. And we kind of had a lot of the same friends. And, what we do in the Cole region, we go out and party and drink. And by high school, that was like a very common, regular thing. I kind of got over it quickly, found a passion in doing hair. I've been a hairstylist for 27 years. I work in a salon in Shamokin that entire time. And my brother kind of went the other way, and he, developed some habits and some addiction. And we struggled with him, for 20 plus years. And so I've always talked about him in the salon. My clients know I'm an open book. I always tease that I'm a Nar-Anon meeting on a daily basis, which is a group for family members of people in addiction. And so I see, and people would just come to me and tell me their problems about their loved ones. They would tell me, my niece is doing not so great. And then the next hair appointment, she's going to rehab. And then the next hair appointment, she's home and doing okay. And then the next, she's not. And so back in 2018, my brother was away in treatment. He had gone to a rehab, a treatment center. And then afterward, instead of us letting him come home, we said, no, not this time. You have to go do something else. So we went to a halfway house in Lidditz, Pennsylvania. And one of the rules of this house where he lived was you had to go to a meeting every day. And in our area, that was not a very common thing. There were meetings around, but it's not what people kind of did after treatment. So he struggled in the beginning with it, and he wasn't actually going. He would call me. He had free range to call me whenever he wanted. And he would call me, and he had said, I'm on the verge of getting kicked out of here. I have to start doing what they want me to do. And one night he went to a place called the 521 Club, and it's an AA clubhouse in Lancaster. And he called me and he was super excited. And he said, Danielle, you're not going to believe this place. It's the coolest thing. They have meetings, they have AA meetings, they have sober events, they do dances for Valentine's Day and, parties for the Super Bowl. And after that, we seen this change in him where he was posting on social media, like getting my meeting on, recovery, using like different verbiage. And I just kept thinking, wow, what is this place? So I Googled it and I looked it up and seen that what it was. And I had never heard of anything like it. So I thought to myself, wow, our area could really use something like this. And like anything, I have all these great ideas, and then time goes by and you don't think about it anymore. But this one, I just couldn't stop thinking about. And so after a few days of it just being on my mind, I kind of got brave enough to speak to a friend of mine and say, I think that our area needs this, and I think I'm supposed to do it. And that's where the idea came about. And then the journey of making it happen started. I contacted the 521 Club. That was my first step. This was around Thanksgiving of 2018. And they were super kind. They invited us to come down. They wanted to, give us a tour, let me pick their brains. And they gave us a copy of their bylaws and some grants they had successfully written. And I came home with that information, literally sat down at my computer and Googled how to start a nonprofit. I had never stepped into anything like this before. I was comfortable doing hair and was, just chugging along in life. And I started kind of just connecting with the right people. Joanne Troutman, she was the CEO of the United Way at the time. She was one of the first people that we connected with. And she kind of helped me, build a board. We did a GoFundMe initially to pay for a lawyer to do our paperwork for the 501c3. And just one step at a time, kind of started building what is now the Oasis. So in September of 2019, we get our official paperwork that we're a 501c3. We planned a fundraiser for September. September is Recovery Awareness Month. So we decided we're going to do a walk in Shamokin. Well, it actually ended up being in Cole Township out by the schools. And we were hoping to raise $5,000 to get something started with Oasis. And we had a huge response. We had, I think there were 320 people that showed up to walk, and we raised $14,000 instead of $5,000. And that really kind of got us started to elevate into we might actually be able to have a physical location. So we went to see John Brown, who was the mayor of Shamokin at the time. And my intentions were, let's just see, I wanted him to know who we were. So if he heard our name, if he heard, hey, there's this group of people in Shamokin trying to do something for people in recovery, that we were kind of legit. And I sat down with him at City Hall and I told him my story. And he said, what do you need from us? And I said, I actually don't need anything but your support. And he said, well, what about a space? And I said, well, we don't have much money to pay rent. I don't know how we're going to sustain money, but what are you thinking? And he said, well, there's the space underneath the public library. And so we kind of started the works of that. COVID happened. That all kind of took that, everyone's COVID story, we shut down. We were kind of at a standstill for a while, but finally in October of 2020, we were able to get the space open, and the rest is history.
What an amazing story. And just for folks listening, can you tell us exactly, just get into a little bit more of the details of what happens at the Oasis Club? I mean, I got to see it myself in person, and it's obviously really impactful when you walk through the doors and you see the ping pong tables and the couches and an area for the camaraderie. But why don't you tell us a little bit more about exactly what happens inside the doors of Oasis?
Sure. So we are a recovery club, and my initial thought and our mission was kind of to copy what the AA Clubhouse at 521 was, which is a place for 12-step meetings, any other kind of recovery meetings, sober events, and kind of hangout space for people. So what we have is we have spaces for meetings. We have, like you said, the ping pong and the pool table, shuffleboard. We have Wi-Fi, computers, printers, things like that. TV, there's a projector there. We have a space where we put on the NFL games, movie nights, game nights, that kind of thing. What we've now evolved into is actually a little bit more. Never was it in the initial intentions to have what we call open hours. So during the day, 3 days a week, there's a CRS, which is a certified recovery specialist on site. And there are folks that are trained that are in recovery themselves. And once they've hit a certain amount of time in recovery, they take a training, they become certified to help people, navigate through getting sober and the struggles and the obstacles that they come across. So they're there on site 3 days a week. And we also added a clothing closet, a food pantry. We have people that walk in the door and say, hey, I need help. And we help them get into treatment. And like I said, those were never in the initial plans, but they're kind of what I call icing on the cake, because we're doing a little more outreach than, that initial, like a safe and sober place, to be.
Yeah. And can you speak a little bit? I mean, I got to in person hear you speak about what happens when you have food out for folks to kind of bring them into the Oasis. And this kind of happened by accident, but I think for the people listening outside of our area, just to reiterate, Shamokin, Pennsylvania is in the coal region, and the coal region in general has been dealing with, these issues for quite a long time. And Danielle's really taking it upon herself to make a difference in folks' lives. But there's folks who are hungry, and I want you to kind of tell the audience the impact you've had whenever there's food being donated or food available.
Sure, absolutely, Chad. So like you said, we are a small coal town, and I always kind of say when I'm speaking that we're a small town with a big drug problem. And along with that big drug problem comes the other obstacles of poverty, we don't have adequate housing for folks. There's not a lot of resources for mental health and things like that. We do not have a shelter. We do not have a food pantry that's open on a daily basis. We have churches and different organizations that do a little bit of that food outreach. But over the summer, we connected with the Shamokin Mission Church, who had been getting food donated by Knoebels amusement park, their catering end of things. It was left over from the weekends prior, like hot dogs, macaroni salad, mac and cheese, those kind of foods. And Shamokin Mission Church had more than they could use. So they contacted us and said, hey, is there a way you can get this food out to the folks that could use it? And so during our open hours, we will host food giveaways. We have a little sandwich board we put out on the sidewalk that says free food today. And people would come in down off the streets, and we have to-go containers, and they can either eat it in, they can take it out, and they can walk in and actually see our space. And it's brought more awareness to the Oasis for those that might pass and they're not quite sure what it is, that they can kind of come in at a safe time and check it out.
Yeah, I mean, you're doing amazing work. I have so many questions for you, and I'm so proud of you. Is Oasis Recovery Club scalable? I mean, like when we think about it in previous podcasts, we talked. Chad and I have a passion for trying to help some of these small towns, and we're thinking about doing it through our entrepreneurship and through our leadership in the business world. But for your lane and the lane you're in, I'm a big believer that if we get everybody on the right seat of the bus, we're all better. And you seem like you're on the right seat of the bus, right? You had something telling you that you could make a difference, and you're doing it. Now, is this scalable to other towns struggling with this drug epidemic that we all are trying to fight? Is that something that you think can be replicated?
Absolutely. To a point, I think. So a little bit more about Oasis is that we are not funded by anyone but our community, which means we survive completely on volunteers, donations, and fundraising. No one is a paid employee. The 3 CRSs that are there throughout the week are kind of lent to us from other grant situations that the county and the United Way has. So on one sense, yes, it's scalable. If there was some magic fund of money that would be able to, go in and open these up in other towns, yes. But on the other hand, our coal region, our community is so unique. I don't know that other communities would have the generosity, the volunteerism, the way that we do. Like, I don't know that this would work in other places. I mean, we have people that, myself included, that just put in endless hours there. You know, the clothing closet, I have people that volunteer and just go there for 8 hours and do laundry. And yes, that it could be replicated, but could it really be replicated? Would people want to do it in the same manner?
Yeah,
does that make sense?
It makes total sense. And again, we're proud of where we're from, right? And yes. I think that's where the passion comes from. You know, I mentioned previously, you know, I've gotten to live outside of the area, and I've come home to my roots because I believe this is the greatest place in the world. I really do. I don't think there's a better place in the world than where we live, and you're taking responsibility to make a difference. So, one of the topic of our podcast today, we touch on leadership every podcast, and it's being an empathetic leader. And what that means is, you know, getting outside of yourself and being concerned about others, and really truly, you know, listening to what they need. So why are you such an empathetic leader? What makes you go from, you know, obviously your personal story, which you shared, but having such a passion to touch so many other people? Like what is that inside of you?
Well, I think that I'm a natural born empath. Like, I'm the kind of person that if I walked into a room of successful people and there was one person struggling, somehow I find that person and need to hear their story or what's going on with them. And that's just like a natural thing that happens. But really what I think I learned over the time of getting Oasis started was my family and myself were almost so addicted to my brother's addiction that I needed to get healthy myself. And I needed to kind of focus on people that were walking in the door because they wanted help, instead of trying to help the person who wasn't ready to get help. And so really, I always say I was addicted to my brother's addiction, and I needed to kind of get better about that. And that's how this kind of happened. And then it becomes, I don't know, it's like, I don't know how to say it. I don't want to say it's pressure, but like when people are relying on you, you kind of keep feeding to go to it and do it. So it keeps you motivated in a sense. There's nothing better than helping someone eat or find a place to safely sleep at night. You know, that motivation is something that you can't even measure.
Yeah. I mean, it's truly, it takes an empath to do what you're doing. Obviously, this is the Lauer Power Podcast, so I would be remiss if I didn't kind of touch on my story. So there's a reason why we're talking today, Danielle. And, you know, so my father, I mentioned on the previous episode, passed away when I was 17. My parents were divorced when I was 4. And the primary reason for that was he was an addict, right? He was addicted to alcohol. And one of the things that I struggle with is I love this guy so much, right? But he would do things that I just can't comprehend as an adult, right? And I think, you know, when we talk about helping people who are addicted, we have to be empathetic. I mean, I can't imagine, like, this guy sober was one of the nicest, funniest, like, motivated people. But when he was in that addiction phase, it was not good, you know? And the one thing I think we all need to do, if we're being real, is discuss that, right? We love folks so much, right? But we have to try to be in their shoes, and it's really difficult to do. And I'll tell a story. You know, I remember going to rehab with him as a kid. You know, I remember sitting there and my mom driving me, and we literally tried everything we could to fix it. And we couldn't do it, right? We literally couldn't do it. We tried everything we could. And eventually it ended up taking his life, you know, and he's missed out on a lot of things. And, you know, but that's the reality of it. And you know, what you just said was, listen, you know, I need to help people who want to be helped. And it's one of the hardest things that I've had to experience in my life. And it sounds like, you know, you've been through that too. But, you know, man, you keep battling. you keep doing it, and it's inspiring. I have to give it to you because, I need to move on to my next question, but I just had to put those, that in there about, you just aren't giving up. And can you tell us a little bit about your personal health issues that you've had, if you're okay with it? Because I think it's important for people to know that, like, you've been through some personal things and you're still here concerned about others. So do you mind sharing some of that? Because we're both fellow battlers of cancer.
Sure. So we're coming up on a year ago. I ended up in the emergency room, what I thought was a kidney stone. And about 6 hours later, I had an ER doctor telling me that I had a very large mass on my left kidney and that it was renal cell carcinoma. I thought he was insane. I thought there was no way that an ER doctor would be able to tell that on a CAT scan. And after other doctors and other appointments and more scans, it was confirmed. And so in January, I had a radical nephrectomy and my adrenal gland removed, and I had stage 3 kidney cancer. I remember one of the first phone calls after I put it out there to my board members at Oasis, like, guys, this is going on. And the very next morning, my VP calls me and she says, you need to take everything from Oasis off of your plate right now, and you need to focus on yourself. We got you. And I did. And that's really hard for me to do, is like allow other people to do things for me. That's a fault of mine, is that I kind of just have to do for myself. But I had to. I knew I had to. And it made me closer and understanding more of the folks that come into the Oasis. I think that one of the greatest compliments anyone's ever given me was a person in recovery, early on in recovery, who said, you're the only person not in addiction, not an addict, who understands what we're going through. And that compliment was huge to me, because none of us can really understand the sickness of it unless you have it. And that's what it is. It's a mental illness, a mental health illness. Our brains are different than those who suffer with addiction. And in a sense, I always kind of tell them, like, well, I think I'm addicted to work or addicted to food, so I kind of understand. Anyway, it was one of those things where I just had to keep going through. I had to know that these people were relying on me, and through the days I didn't feel so great, I took the time to heal myself and use the one day at a time, just like, they say in 12 steps, one day at a time. And I've I'm still doing one day at a time. Today I wake up and it's a good day. I'm cancer-free at the moment. And like you had said in your previous podcasts, living life 6 months at a time. That's kind of where I'm at with scans right now. The first 2 years are critical. But one day at a time, we're doing it.
Inspiration is the word. I mean, so you have somebody here who's battling a major disease, who, took some time, but is still there running a nonprofit in town for people who need her. And she's concerned about others. That's a leader. I mean, that's a leader, right? So again, we're so proud of you, and we're jumping all over here a little bit, but I think it makes sense to kind of move, to the business side of things, because your story, again, I can't reiterate enough, is fascinating. But part of what we talk about on this podcast is selling. So how do we sell Oasis to the community, right? And can you touch on that process of who did you have to sell to make this idea come to reality?
Well, you kind of just touched on it, Chad, when you said sell to the community, because really that was who I had to sell it to. Initially I spoke to my husband and said, hey, I have this idea. And kind of side story was, I thought this was going to be like my thing when our son graduated from high school. So we have, I have a stepdaughter who's 31 and out of the house, and my son was a senior in high school. And we thought, I'm going to need like an empty nest project. Little did I know that we would have a pandemic. He would graduate from high school in our living room virtually and do his first year of college at home. But in the middle of that all happening, I ended up with custody of my 9-year-old. Well, she's now 9. She was 5 at the time, niece, because my brother and his wife's addictions both took them into treatment. And so I ended up juggling this whole situation. But back to the original question, I said to Mark, I want to do this. And he supports me. He's the real champion a lot of times, because every crazy idea I have or work that needs to be done, he never complains, and he gets down to the club and he does what needs to be done. But he was, the kind of the first sell. The next was getting brave enough to say it out loud, saying, hey, I have this idea and I want to create this place for people to go. And they used to use drugs and they used to use alcohol, but now we're going to give them a sober, safe space. And I've had very few people have a negative reaction. Astonishingly, most people were incredibly positive, because it has touched almost every person in our community. If it's not directly their family, it's their best friend's family, or it's their, neighbor's family. So it's been pretty much welcomed with open arms. I used to always look at the sound off and wait to see if someone was complaining about me in the news item sound off, but they are not. They're supporting us. We recently just had a Thanksgiving dinner, and we had about 70 people attend the dinner. We as Oasis did not have to provide one single thing for that dinner. I put an ask out on social media, and we had turkeys come in cooked, hams, all the fixings, everything was donated by the community. They want a solution for this problem.
So that leads me to my next question. You are doing a great job for those who are already impacted. What can we do in our community to try to reduce the amount of folks being impacted?
Well, I think one of the best things that has happened is the awareness. Opioids, we now understand the Oxycontin, that, the doctors aren't overprescribing, people educating people, knowing that, take your old prescriptions and safely dispose of them. Don't let grandma have her old pills for, 12 years after they've been prescribed. Watch your kids when they get hurt at sports. If the doctor is prescribing something, make sure they're only taking it when they really need it, because all of that we've now learned has led to the street use of heroin and other opioids. The CDC says 80% of people that have been legally and justifiably prescribed an opioid are the people that are using street drugs. So I think that generation was created, but now moving forward, our awareness and education can prevent that from continuing.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we're all thinking about, and I think the quicker we get to work on that, the better. And again, I literally am super happy that we met. I really think that there's a reason for it, and I think our momentum together, even if it's periodic, will really make a difference. So as we wrap up your interview today, I just wanted to let you know that on behalf of Lauer Media, we will be donating $1,000 to the Oasis Recovery Club, this year, and we really hope we can have a small impact on what you're doing. And if anybody needs to chat with somebody or is interested in replicating what Danielle has started here in Shamokin, Pennsylvania, I think, as you could tell, she'd be more than happy to chat with you. So, Danielle, we really appreciate you. You're a true inspiration, and we can't wait to get your story out there to folks. And if anybody needs help in Shamokin and you're listening, Oasis is a great place to go for a safe space. If you're looking to, stay sober and enjoy a place without alcohol or the temptation of drugs.
Thank you so much, Chad, and thank you for the donation. It's much appreciated, and I agree with you. I'm glad that we got to meet, and I look forward to collaborating more on things. So thank you so much for having me today.
What an interview by Danielle Houtz, Chad. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, she's a fantastic person. She does remarkable things within the community, and her perseverance with her own struggles, her own battles, is just it's enduring. To hear her stories, and I'm just happy to know her as a friend. She's great.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I mean, if you're not inspired by her story of literally battling stage 3 cancer and still being concerned of others and, using her family's adversity, right? Her battles with her brother. And if you noticed how much she said she meant her whole family. So that one addiction has an impact on so many other people. And she's using that to help others instead of just worrying about herself. And that's the entire point of this podcast, right? She could have sat home all day and said, woe is me, woe is my brother, woe is my family, and complained and did nothing and just used it to be down in the dumps. Instead, while she's battling, her brother's addiction and her own cancer diagnosis, she's in town feeding people. I mean, literally feeding people, giving them a place to go to try to get better. And if she impacts one person, she's winning.
Yep. And she's impacted way more than one person.
Yeah.
She's doing great.
It's ridiculous. So, I mean, anybody who's listening who wants to donate, wants to support her in her mission, Oasis Recovery Club in Shamokin is where you can find her. Even if you don't have, the money, you might have the time. If you don't have the time, you might be able to donate something, like she said, food, anything, clothing, can help her in her mission. And I think she's going to continue to make a difference. So that takes us to our leadership topic of the day, because we're going to learn to lead together, which is leading with empathy. Leading
with empathy.
Right. So we need to be empathetic leaders. It's really important, even everybody. So it's funny when we talk about entrepreneurship, one of the things that I hear from folks on why they don't succeed or why they don't give something a try is what other people might think. And we think people think about us way more than they do.
Nobody thinks of us.
Yeah. But when you talk to people about it, they'll be like, well, what will people think? Well, you think people are thinking about you way more than they are, right? That's just the reality of it. Most people, even if they hear these things like cancer diagnosis or addict, right? They'll have a feeling of empathy for about 2 seconds and then they get back on with their life, right? If you're in trouble, if something happens to you, if you fail at your business, you're like, oh, what will people think, right? They're not thinking about you. It's just that simple. It's not in our nature. People are selfish human beings, and it's okay. But, when you're a leader, you need to be empathetic to what somebody else is going through. Okay. And how you do that is you're present, you're truly concerned and curious about what somebody might be dealing with. Right. So let's talk about an example, and I'm going to be vulnerable again, as always. I'll give you an example, and that example is that as a kid, I shared some of my personal experiences. So I'll give you an example of there were nights where my mom would just literally just drive until the sun came up, right? And the reason why I say that is let's say 2 people are going to school. It's me, who is literally sleeping in the backseat of a car while she drives, and then I show up to school. And it's somebody else who wasn't dealing with those things and got a great night's sleep. And literally we both show up to school and they're like, well, Chad, you didn't do quite as well on, your spelling test as Susie did. Well, there could be a reason for that. Right. And if nobody ever asked me what I did all night, right, they would never know. But we expect those 2 kids to perform the same way. Right. Same thing with medical diagnoses. Right. You might have a medical diagnosis. Like, I didn't tell my story I just go through my day. People see me. I look normal. Unless I take my shirt off and you can see all my scars, I look normal. But they don't know I just got out of the MRI machine and might have got bad news. But I'm expected to show up and perform just as much as everybody else, right? So that's where my empathy comes from. It's from my personal experiences. And I think that if we all could try to put ourselves in other people's shoes, that our leadership will become much better. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me. You know, you want to go into thinking that, you know, you don't know what struggles that other person's going through. Exactly. And everybody's going through something.
Exactly.
Everybody is. So you want to go in with that plan of attack, first and foremost. I mean, especially when you meet someone for the first time, right? So, you know, never assume anything. Always know that other person's going through something. So be as empathetic as possible.
Correct. And it's funny. We talk about empathetic leaders and, you know, active listening, you know, vulnerability, putting yourself in other people's shoes. That's never, even outside of work, right? That's just being a leader. It's literally being a leader. And if you do that for other folks, you know, they're likely to reciprocate. So it literally just makes the culture of wherever you are better. Again, it could be a business, it could be a team, it could be a school. But let's work on being more empathetic leaders. Sound good?
That sounds great to me, man. You did it again, Chad.
Well, listen, again, I appreciate you guys following us in this journey, and we can't wait to get started on the next one.
Are you a business owner, a leader, or an aspiring achiever looking to turn life's challenges into powerful fuel for your success? You've come to the right place. Get ready to unlock the secrets to turning life's hardships into your most powerful ally. Your hosts, along with our incredible guests, will help you tap into your own Lauer power and guide you towards the success you've always dreamed of.